All right, everybody, you ready for another deep dive?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
This week, we're diving into the Observer Group newspapers, October 16th edition.
Lots to unpack there.
Yeah, we've got a little bit of everything this time. We've got LA 28 Olympics, Chargers, football, even a healthcare debate brewing.
That's right. It's like a California buffet up in here.
It really is. But don't worry, we're here to break it all down for you.
Absolutely.
So let's kick things off with a story that's about way more than just sports. Black Californians are really taking center stage in the planning of the LA 28 Olympics.
I was really struck by that too. And it's not just about being represented, it's about having real influence over how these games are planned and how they impact communities, especially communities that haven't always benefited from these kinds of mega events in the past.
Yeah, and we saw that Games for All theme that Mayor Bass has been pushing.
Right?
But I think what really hit home for me was reading Rosalind Brandt Clark's perspective in The Observer.
Oh, yeah. She's the real deal.
She's a former Olympian herself.
Ex
And she's not just celebrating the symbolism here. She's like, okay, how does this translate into tangible change for everyday people?
That's the question, right? We can have all the representation in the world, but if it doesn't result in better schools, better jobs, safer streets for everyone, then what's the point?
Big questions for sure.
For sure. And it'll be interesting to see how it all unfolds over these next couple of years.
Yeah, and speaking of unfolding in a totally different arena,
Hmm.
can we talk about that Chargers game?
Oh, man, what a game.
Talk about a nail biter.
Right down to the wire.
It really was. It felt like they really channeled that whole underdog spirit, though, didn't it?
Yeah, they had to overcome some serious obstacles, both on and off the field, but they found a way.
They did. And they did it with a rookie running back, no less.
Kamani Vidal, right?
Kamani Vidal scoring a touchdown on his very first NFL touch.
Talk about making a statement.
Unbelievable. And then can we talk about Coach Harbaugh for a second? Because
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah.
The man's a warrior.
the man had like a heart rhythm issue right before the game got treated and came back to coach his team to victory.
Talk about dedication. I mean, I'm not saying I'd recommend that approach for everyone, but you got to admire the guy's passion.
To an O with arrhythmias. That was the quote, right?
That's classic Harbaugh, though, isn't it? Always got a quip ready.
So speaking of commitment and finding a way, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about California politics, because the Observer this week gave us a real mixed bag. Gas prices, minimum wage education, property taxes. It's a lot to unpack.
It is a lot. It's like they took every hot button issue and threw it in a blender. But what's interesting to me is that beneath the surface of all these seemingly disparate stories, there's this common thread of economic equity running through it all.
Okay, so give me an example. How does that play out in these stories?
Well, let's take that new study on California's $20 minimum wage for fast food workers.
Okay, yeah.
Remember, that was a huge point of contention a couple of years back. Now the data's in, and guess what? It's actually working. Yeah, higher wages haven't led to job losses like some folks were predicting. In fact, it's actually given the economy a bit of a boost.
Wow. So win for workers.
For sure. But then on the flip side, you've got the NAACP coming down hard on LA City Council member Kevin DeLeon,
Oh, right, yeah.
giving him a failing grade for his response to that leaked audio scandal from a couple years ago. Remember the one with the racist language?
Yeah.
They're saying he hasn't done nearly enough to address the underlying issues of systemic racism that allowed that incident to happen in the first place.
So it's like we're seeing these glimmers of progress on some fronts,
Mhm.
but then these deeply ingrained issues like racism, they just keep rearing their ugly heads.
It's a constant push and pull, right? We take a step forward, two steps back. It's a reminder that progress isn't linear.
It's not a straight line, that's for sure.
Not in California, that's for sure.
No.
Too many twists and turns for that.
It's true. Yeah, it's like California's on this tightrope walk between progress and these like deeply rooted issues.
And, nowhere is that balancing act more apparent than in our healthcare system.
Oh, yeah, true.
The Observer did a whole thing this week on Proposition 35, which is going to be on the ballot this November.
Right.
And it all comes down to how we fund healthcare in the state, specifically medical, and how much doctors get reimbursed for treating medical patients.
Okay, so healthcare policy can sometimes feel like its own language.
Yeah.
What's the quick and dirty version for those of us who don't speak fluent bureaucracy?
Okay, so essentially, Medi-Cal is California's program that makes sure that our low-income residents can get access to healthcare.
Right.
Millions of people rely on it.
Yeah.
But here's the catch. The reimbursement rates for doctors are so low that a lot of doctors just don't accept medical patients.
So it's like people desperately need affordable care, but there aren't enough doctors who are willing to provide it because they're not being adequately compensated.
It's a vicious cycle.
Yeah.
And that's where Prop 35 comes in. So what it would do is make an existing tax on these managed healthcare organizations, these HMOs, make that tax permanent.
Okay.
And we're talking potentially $35 billion over the next 4 years.
Wow.
That money would then go towards increasing medical reimbursements for doctors, hopefully incentivizing them to take on more medical patients.
Right. Okay, so more money for doctors equals more access to care for the people who need it most.
Right.
Makes sense.
Right? It seems like a no-brainer, right?
Yeah.
Well, it would be, except it's not that simple.
There's always a catch.
Right.
Yeah.
So even though there isn't really any organized opposition to Prop 35, yet Governor Newsom has expressed some reservations about it.
Let me guess, it's about the money.
It's always about the money, right?
Right.
So while he agrees that increasing medical reimbursements is super important, he's worried that this particular tax revenue stream is needed elsewhere, like education and infrastructure.
Oh, so it's like that classic California dilemma. So many crucial needs and not nearly enough resources to go around.
It's a tough one. And to really drive this point home, the Observer included this really stark example. In some parts of California, the wait time for a mammogram through Medi-Cal can be as long as 6 months.
6 months. You're
And-
kidding?
Oh,
Are you serious?
I'm telling you.
I mean, early detection, that's everything when it comes to treating breast cancer. 6 months is just unacceptable.
It's a really long time, and it really illustrates just how inadequate healthcare funding can have these real-life devastating consequences for people.
Yeah, for sure.
So come November, voters are going to have a tough decision to make. Do they prioritize these immediate healthcare needs, like getting those wait times down by supporting Prop 35? Or do they side with this need for long-term budget flexibility that the governor is talking about?
Tough choices all around. And speaking of tough situations, the Observer also dove into the challenges facing California's ports.
Oh yeah, the unsung heroes of the California economy, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
I feel like we don't talk about them enough, but they are absolutely essential to how our state functions.
100%. The Observer really highlighted how crucial they are to our economy, driving trade, supporting tourism. Millions of jobs depend on the ports.
Yeah.
And it's not just the ports themselves, right? It's that whole interconnected web of goods, movement, trucking, warehousing, logistics. All of that keeps California running.
It's a massive system. And of course, like everything else we've been talking about, it's facing some serious challenges. Declining market share, struggling to get enough federal funding, and then there's always that question of, environmental impact.
Right. It's like walking a tightrope trying to balance economic growth with environmental sustainability. How do you keep the ports competitive while also mitigating their impact on the planet?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So are there any bright spots, any reason for optimism when it comes to the ports?
Well, Assemblymember Mike Gibson, he chairs the Assembly Select Committee on Ports and Goods movement. He's been really vocal about this need for more state funding for the ports.
Okay.
His argument is that California needs to be making these consistent, dedicated investments if we want our ports to stay competitive on a global level.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it sounds like he's found some allies in this fight, right?
It seems like it.
The Observer mentioned that Governor Newsom recently put up $27 million toward different port projects that are supposed to make them more efficient, reduce emissions. So every little bit helps, I guess.
Every little bit does help, and it shows that at least someone's paying attention. And then on top of that, Senator Padilla managed to snag over $112 million in federal funds for infrastructure upgrades at the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach.
Oh, wow.
So we've got both state and federal leaders who are at least acknowledging that investing in these ports is essential for California's economic future.
Okay, so maybe a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel.
It's a start, right? But it definitely sounds like there's still a long way to go. It's like that tightrope walk we were talking about earlier. One wrong step, and it could all come crashing down.
The stakes are high, for sure. It's amazing how these stories, even though they're so different, like on the surface, they all kind of tie back to the central question of how do we move California forward in a way that's both, equitable and sustainable?
Yeah, it's like we're trying to solve this massive multidimensional puzzle.
Right.
And the solutions are definitely not always clear or easy.
Not at all. But I gotta say, after diving into all of this with you, I'm feeling cautiously optimistic.
Oh, really? Tell me more about this cautious optimism. What's got you feeling hopeful?
Well, I mean, yeah, the challenges are real, the stakes are high, but we're seeing these glimmers of hope, right? Like you've got Black leaders stepping up to shape the LA 28 Olympics, researchers proving that a higher minimum wage can actually be good for everyone. Heck, even Coach Harbaugh defying a heart condition because his team needed him.
Okay, I see what you're saying. It's about recognizing those moments of resilience of those people and communities that are fighting for change, even when it's hard, even when it feels like an uphill battle.
Exactly. It's not about pretending the problems don't exist. It's about reminding ourselves that progress is possible.
It's about holding on to that hope.
Yeah. Even when it feels like we're taking one step forward, two steps back.
Exactly. And that's what makes these deep dives so important.
Right.
By digging into these stories, by understanding all the different angles, we become more informed, more engaged citizens.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
So as we kind of start to wrap up this deep dive, I'm curious what's sticking with you? Like what's going to stay with you after we sign off today?
For me, it's that tension that we keep seeing between progress and these really deeply entrenched challenges. We
Yeah.
saw it with economic justice, with healthcare, with the environment. It's like California is this microcosm of the struggles that are playing out across the entire country.
Oh, for sure. And it just reminds us that we all have a role to play in shaping the future,
Yeah.
right? Like whether it's voting or supporting organizations that are doing good work or even just having conversations with people in our communities, every little bit counts.
Beautifully said. And I think on that note, it's time for us to come up for air.
Time to resurface from this deep dive.
Exactly. But the conversation doesn't end here.
Not at all. Keep those wheels turning, everybody. So until next time, stay curious, stay engaged, and keep asking those tough questions. You never know what we'll uncover in our next deep dive.